Okay, welcome to class 11. Today it's going to be a relatively short lecture because we are going to just go over lab 4, and then I'm going to give you some time to work on that. So let's go and get started with that. All right, so lab 4, we're going to be doing this thing called Python SuperPaint. But before we do that, a couple quick reviews here. Keyboard input. Keyboard input, you have to have some sort of game loop like we have down here. Pygame.event.pump needs to be toward the top of that, and then keys equal pygame.key.getPressed. That gets the keys, state of all the keys and stores it in here, and then we need to look up in that pygame.k_escape would say if the escape key is pressed, we do something based on that. And we could add other keys in there as well with other if statements and add the code indented under there for what we want to have happen. And in this case, all this is doing is making random circles until it quits. And this is from last time, so I went through that relatively quickly. If you want, you can cut and paste that or type that in and try it. But this is just to illustrate these 3 lines here of pumping the event queue, getting the key state from that, and then looking in the key state and saying, hey, is this key pressed? If it is, that reports as a true, which then gets us into the indented code of that if statement. Okay, getting the mouse input, mx, my equal pygame.mouse.getPosition, or get POS. And then getting the mouse button status, we have those here, left, middle, right. And setting the mouse to be visible or setting the mouse position. These bottom 2 we're not going to worry about. We don't really need those. And really quickly before we do anything else, here's a gray cat trying to get in the way of things. So the name is Gray Kitty, and she's horrible. All right, anyway, the timing functions, the only ones we don't really need to worry about these for this lab, but just to review them, take a quick look at that. Pygame has inside of it ability to wait or delay, which do the same thing, but one is more accurate than the other, and one uses less CPU resources than the other. So this one is like sleep, less CPU intensive, but not as accurate. This one, very accurate, but uses CPU time. So if you're running other things, it'll take some time away from those. And then get ticks we can use for timing things. And then there's this FPS clock thing. We'll be back to that later in the semester, but right now we've covered it. We'll come back to that later. Okay, and clearing the screen, ds.fill 000, fill the display surface with black, or we could draw a big black rectangle over the top of the entire display surface. That would work too. And then a game loop, basically we have the stuff before the loop itself, and the stuff after the loop. And inside the loop, that's what I want to focus on right now. Inside the loop, you're going to pump the event queue, read the input, meaning the keys or the mouse or whatever, and then process that with if statements. If this key was pressed, if this mouse button was pressed, do something about that, and then render the screen. In rendering, we're going to clear the screen and then draw whatever we need to draw, and then do a pygame.display.update or update the display. And then that's inside of a loop, so it'll happen over and over again. And then after the loop, close the screen, exit the program, clean up whatever else needs to be cleaned up. Okay, now let's take a look at the lab sheet. So give me just a second here to switch the display over so we can see that. All right, so here's the lab. In the lab, basically, I want you to get used to getting input from the keyboard and the mouse and doing something with that. And so let's take a look at what the program says to do. It says write a program that uses the Pygame module to do the following. Initialize the Pygame display, execute a game loop until the escape key is pressed, and then within the loop, if you press R, it's going to select the color red. G is going to select the key G is going to select the color green. The key B is going to select the color blue. W is going to select white. And then 1 is going to select a small brush size, 2 medium brush size, 3 large brush size, and then C will clear the whole screen. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to make a paint program that when you move the mouse around on there, it's going to track where the mouse is, and if you press the left mouse button and then move the mouse, it's going to draw a circle with that brush size on the screen, so it's going to leave like a trail behind. If you press the right mouse button, it's going to erase the color by drawing a black circle on the screen in that selected brush size wherever the mouse pointer is. So in other words, we're making a paint program. And to give you an idea of what that looks like, your program might look like this. This is a little picture I drew using the program. So it's going to allow us to paint and draw things on the screen. And notice there is a chance for bonus points here. So taking a quick look at that, there's a possibility to get quite a few bonus points. So if you had trouble on any of the quizzes, or just want to bank some bonus points for the midterm or future quizzes and things like that, you might want to look at doing some of these. Some of these are easy, some are a little more difficult. So 2 points for adding a new key. So when you press the F1 key, it'll randomly select a color. So rather than just red, green, blue, and white, it'll pick a random RGB value when you press F1. And then you can draw in that random color. And then it's also 2 points for adding a brush selector shape where 8 makes a circle and 9 makes a square brush to draw on the screen. 2 additional points for adding an exit button that when you click on it, it causes the program to close. So that could be just a little box in the corner with an X on it, or it could have the word exit written out. Anyway, just a box that when you click in that box, it closes the window. And then up to 5 points, instead of changing the color using the keyboard, draw a little palette like MS Paint, and then have at least 8 colors where they can click on that and then draw without having to press the RGB and W keys. And then another 4 points for drawing icons for the brush size and shape. So here's an example of what it might look like with the bonus features. There's my exit button. Here's selecting the brush shape. Here's the brush size. And then here's the little color palette. And you can draw on that. Okay, so that's it. Now, rather than turning you loose on that, though, I want to at least spend just a tiny bit of time kind of illustrating what we're talking about here. So let me start here. Let me bring up idle and get you started on this with a little framework. Okay, so here's idle that came up. Let me make a new window, new file. And let me push this in this so you can see it. Okay, so this is going to be all right, so the first thing we're going to do, import Pygame. And then we're going to initialize Pygame. And then we're going to make the display surface. So ds equal pygame.display.init. All right, so we now have a display surface. Now we're going to start our game loop. I'm going to say while true. And then indented underneath that, I'm going to say pygame.event.pump. And then I'm going to have keys equal pygame.key.get pressed. And I'm also going to go ahead and capture the mouse x and y, so mx, my equal mouse dot, or pygame.mouse, pygame.mouse.get position, POS. And then I'm also going to capture the mouse button. So let's just call this left mouse button. Let's do this. Mouse button left, mouse button middle, mouse button right. And you could write out longer words to make that a little more clear, but since I just wanted to get this shown quickly, get pressed. All right, so we've captured all that input. Now I'm going to do some stuff based on that input here. So keeping with our kind of game loop concept here, things I want to do with that input. Well, if keys sub pygame.k underscore escape. So if that's true, then we're going to break out of the game loop. So that's going to end our loop. Now, before I do anything else, I'm going to do some other things as well here. We said one of the things that we want to have happen in our program is if the C key is pressed, so if keys subscript pygame.k underscore C. Now, if you remember back on the lab sheet, that was supposed to clear the screen. So how do we clear the screen? ds.fill, and then we're going to fill in the color 0, 0, 0. And I'm going to put a comment here. Clear the screen. And let me put one up here too. Exit the game loop. So notice those comments there are going to help us understand what's going on when we look at this code and say, well, what does the C key mean? Well, it means we're going to clear the screen. What is escape for and that break for? That's to exit the game loop. Now, what I'm going to do before I do anything else, though, is here's the part where we're going to render. Now here, normally in a game, we would have a clear screen under here, but in this case, we are not going to have that. And the reason being that we're making like a paint program. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little draw here. So the draw, I'm going to do a pygame.draw.circle. And the circle on the display surface, I'm going to make it white for right now. And the circle position is going to be at the mouse X and mouse Y. Well, we captured those in variables, so MX, comma, MY. And the radius, I'm going to go ahead and put it at, let's put it at 5 for right now. And let's make that circle filled in. Now, to see that change happen, we need to do a pygame, let me indent that. Pygame.display.update. Okay, so there we have all that. And then after our loop, so let's condense those. So this is kind of pre-loop stuff. Pre-loop. This is the game loop. And then this down here is post-loop. And there, I'm going to close the screen, so pygame.display.quit. Okay, and this is all stuff we've seen before for the most part, but let's run this and see what happens. And I'm going to go ahead and give this a name. I'm going to call it paint1.py. Oh, we left out something. I got to fix that. We did not. There, this needs to be display.setMode. I screwed up. $800, $600. All right, let's try again. I was going too fast there. All right, so here's my screen, and notice it is leaving a trail behind as I move my mouse around. But I'm not clicking, I'm just moving the mouse, so I'm not clicking on any of the buttons. It's leaving that trail behind just like a paint program. And if I press C, it clears the screen, and then I can leave another trail. Now, the question is, going back to that code just briefly, how do we get it to only leave a trail when the left mouse button is pressed? Well, and let me make this a little more clear. Mouse left and let me change all these. Mouse middle, mouse right. So when we have the left button pressed, we want it to draw. So the obvious way to do that is just like this indented code here only clears the screen when they press C. We want this circle to only be drawn when the left mouse button is pressed. So here, if mouse left is true, then draw that circle. Otherwise, don't draw the circle. Let's see what that does. Now notice it's not drawing, but if I click the mouse button, it draws. When I let off the mouse button, it stops drawing. Okay, so that should give you a framework to get started on that lab. So looking at this code that we have in here again, the pre-loop, we import pygame, we initialize pygame, we get a display surface which brings up the window by calling setMode. After that, we enter the loop. We pump the event queue to pull all of the event messages out of the queue that Windows was filling up and process those. Some of those messages alter the key state, some of them alter the mouse X and Y position, some of them alter the mouse button state, but we capture all that information. And now we process some of that information here. If escape was pressed, we break out of the loop. If the C key was pressed, we clear the screen by filling it with black. And then down here, we say, hey, if the mouse button, left button was pressed, we draw the circle, otherwise we don't. And then we update the display. So you would take, and then after the loop, we just close the window, exit the program. So you're gonna take a program like this, and then you're going to flesh it out so we can change colors. Now, quick hint as to how to change the color that we're drawing down here. I'm going to show you kind of how to do that. So what we can do is we can make a variable here. So here, I can say color. And then before the loop, I can set that variable to be that. So now all I have to do in my code is if they press, for example, the R key, so just like we did the C key here, if the R key is pressed, then change the color variable to have a different RGB value in it like that. So right now, this program, the way we changed it, is going to do the same thing that we just did before, but now we're storing that color white in a variable that could be changed to something else. C still clears, so let me draw like a little picture here. All right, so that's basically what you're gonna do, is you're gonna take that program that we wrote, and add those additional features that you need to add. Make sure you understand the code that we wrote there, but add that. And really, that's it for what we're going to cover for right now. Let me switch this back over just really quickly here. Give me 1 second here. Okay, so we looked at the lab sheet, we wrote a little bit of code, and now it's your turn to work on the lab. So go ahead and get started on that. That's all we're going to do today. So work on lab 4. Make sure you have other labs turned in. And if you get stuck on something or need help, send me an email, send me a text message, send me a message on Discord. There's plenty of ways to get a hold of me. Give me a call on my cell phone, but before you call, you might send me a text message or call and leave a voicemail, because I don't want to answer phone calls for people trying to sell me extended warranties on my car. So if I don't recognize the number, I generally won't answer. But get a hold of me if you're having trouble. I'll be happy to help. And other than that, stay safe. And next class, we're going to forge on, and actually the next lab, we're going to make a full working game. Also, keep in mind that those bonus points are available. And so after you get the core part of the lab working, see if you can knock off a few of those bonus points. One thing I would recommend, based on the stuff that was turned in, though, is make sure you put that comment block at the top of your program. A few comments that says your name, what lab it is, what section you're in, class and section. So ETGG1801.51, make sure that's in there. And then if you do the bonus, I want you to include a comment that says bonus completed, and then list the different bonus features that you added in that, because that will help me when I grade it to look and make sure I didn't accidentally miss any of the bonus stuff that you added to it. Okay, and for submitting that, submit it on Blackboard. Just submit the .py file. There's no other things you need to submit. So just turn in the .py file, and that's all you need. And that's all for today. And stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask. I'll see you soon.